When the pages of history are turned, certain names emerge not as ordinary rulers, but as forces of destruction that reshaped entire civilizations. One such name is Genghis Khan, a man whose horse hooves echoed across continents, leaving behind burning cities, broken societies, and a silence that stretched for generations. But the question remains, was he simply a conqueror? Or was he the greatest catastrophe the medieval world ever witnessed? Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in the late 12th century, rose from extreme hardship to become the founder of the Mongol Empire, one of the largest contiguous empires in world history. His early life was defined by loss, exile, and survival. His father was poisoned when Temujin was still young, and his family was abandoned by their tribe. These early struggles shaped a personality driven by resilience, suspicion, and an unbreakable will to dominate. At that time, the Mongol tribes were fragmented, nomadic, constantly fighting each other and lacking unity. Temujin changed that reality forever. Through alliances, intimidation, loyalty systems, and ruthless elimination of rivals, he united the steppe tribes under a single authority. By the time he was declared Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler, he was no longer just a tribal leader. He had become the center of a rapidly expanding military machine that would soon shake the known world. Temujin's rise was not built on comfort or privilege. It was forged in survival. As a young boy, he experienced betrayal from allies and abandonment from his own people. These experiences created in him a deep understanding of loyalty and fear. In his worldview, survival required absolute control. He slowly began gathering followers, not just through persuasion, but through a strict code of loyalty. Those who remained loyal were rewarded with positions of trust. Those who betrayed him were eliminated without hesitation. Unlike traditional tribal systems, Genghis Khan introduced a structured military hierarchy. Merit mattered more than noble birth. Soldiers were organized into disciplined units, trained for speed, coordination, and psychological warfare. His leadership style combined discipline with terror. Discipline ensured loyalty within his army, while terror ensured obedience from his enemies. Step by step, the scattered Mongol tribes transformed into a unified force. What once were rival clans became a single, unstoppable military structure. This transformation was not peaceful. It was built on the collapse of old tribal systems and the rise of absolute authority under one man. By the end of this phase, Genghis Khan was no longer just uniting tribes. He was preparing for expansion beyond the Mongolian steppes. Once the Mongol tribes were unified, Genghis Khan turned his attention outward. The first major expansions targeted the Jin dynasty in northern China. At that time, China was divided into powerful states with fortified cities, advanced agriculture, and complex governance systems. However, the Mongol warfare strategy was unlike anything those kingdoms had faced before. They relied on speed, mobility, psychological pressure, and coordinated attacks that struck before enemies could fully prepare. Cities fell one after another. Fortifications that were considered unbreakable collapsed under relentless siege tactics and psychological warfare. After securing victories in China, Genghis Khan expanded westward into Central Asia, targeting the Khwarezmian Empire. Initially, there was an attempt at diplomacy and trade between the Mongols and Khwarezmian rulers. However, a tragic incident involving Mongol merchants and envoys led to a complete breakdown of relations. This event triggered one of the most devastating military campaigns in medieval history. Cities such as Bukhara, Samarkand, and Nishapur were caught in the path of the Mongol advance. These were not just cities. They were centers of learning, culture, and commerce. When the Mongol forces arrived, resistance often resulted in total destruction. The Mongols used calculated terror as a strategy. The more a city resisted, the harsher its punishment became. This created a psychological weapon that often forced cities to surrender before battle even began. Entire regions were destabilized, trade routes were disrupted, knowledge centers were destroyed or abandoned. The shockwaves of these campaigns were felt far beyond the battlefield. At the height of his power, Genghis Khan's empire stretched across vast territories, from the borders of China to Central Asia and parts of Eastern Europe. His military system was not just about conquest, it was about domination through fear. One of the most striking aspects of Mongol warfare was psychological intimidation. Stories of entire cities being wiped out spread rapidly, often exaggerated, but effective in forcing surrender elsewhere. Resistance was met with overwhelming force. Some cities were completely destroyed as warnings to others. Populations were displaced, and urban centers that once thrived were left in ruins. However, the Mongol system was also highly organized. They maintained intelligence networks, communication systems using relay stations, and strict military discipline. This allowed them to manage vast territories with surprising efficiency. Still, the cost was enormous. Societies were disrupted, economies collapsed, cultural centers were erased or severely weakened. Under Genghis Khan, war became not just a means of conquest, but a tool of systemic transformation, often through destruction. Genghis Khan died in 1227, but by that time, he had already created the largest contiguous empire the world had ever seen. However, the empire was heavily dependent on his personal leadership. After his death, it was divided among his sons and grandsons, leading to the formation of separate khanates. Initially, these divisions still maintained Mongol dominance across regions, but internal conflicts slowly began to emerge. Rivalries between different branches of the ruling family weakened central control. Over time, the unity that Genghis Khan had imposed through force began to fade. Different khanates developed their own interests, policies, and conflicts. The once unified Mongol Empire gradually transformed into fragmented states, each struggling to maintain control over its territories. Genghis Khan remains one of history's most controversial figures. To some, he is a brilliant military strategist who created order out of chaos. To others, he is responsible for immense destruction and loss of life on an unprecedented scale. His legacy is not simple. It is layered with conquest, innovation, fear, and transformation. History does not remember leaders only by what they build, but also by what they destroy. Genghis Khan's story is a reminder that power without balance can reshape the world, but not always for the better. His empire changed geography, politics, and trade routes, but it also left behind deep scars in human history. In the end, his life raises a timeless question. Is true greatness measured by how much one conquers, or by how much one preserves?